what could be the broader implications of the detainee exchange for the ongoing ceasefire negotiations, and could it lead to a permanent truce or rather further escalations?
Welcome to you, and thank you, and thank you for Qnews for having me. Of course, these incidents and these bombings are very extraordinary. There has been no victims, and there are no leads or information announced by the Israeli side, and therefore there are doubts and suspicions regarding who's responsible for these bombings, or more clearly, what will be the implication of such bombings. Of course, there are endeavors by the far right officials to complete the annexation of the West Bank. This coincides with ruling out the Shabak and Mossad from the negotiations, which is more control to the political aspect in the negotiation path, and deciding to go back to the war, which is highly desired by the far right and Netanyahu, and also continuing the occupation and the annexation of more Palestinian lands. Here, of course, what we're going to see is that the Israeli military operations will continue in the West Bank, and the Israeli media talked about pushing 3 military brigades to the West Bank, which means that there is an escalated operation will be launched by the Israeli troops. Of course, this also will have a very negative impact on the negotiation path in Gaza, despite that so far it has been going very well, and despite what has been stated by the Israeli side regarding the mix-up of one of the Israeli detainees due to the airstrikes launched on Gaza, we are hopeful that this incident does not have further implications on the negotiation path, especially that the Palestinian resistance delivered the name of 6 detainees to be exchanged tomorrow for the Palestinian detainees, and the second phase of the ceasefire negotiations will take place, and with starting the reconstruction equipment and mobile homes crossing the the Rafah crossing, and the great role played by the mediators, including Egypt, played during the past few days to continue the ceasefire agreement in Gaza.
Right, Mr. Ezz Elden, there has been also this mix-up issue that occurred in the remains of one of the detainees, Sherry Bibas, and how would you think that will reflect on the ongoing negotiations, particularly that Hamas acknowledged the possibility of this mix-up due to the Israeli airstrikes?
If there is the well intention here, and of course we do not see that from the Israeli side, Hamas recognized this mix-up between the remains due to the Israeli airstrikes, so the victims was mixed up, and consequently Hamas said that they will try to reconsider and to put more scrutiny into this, and going back to the Israeli side with a result. The Israeli side, whether the Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu or the far right officials, are practicing all pressures possible to go back to the war by any means possible. There is a third party here, which is the the loved ones of the detainees and who are also pressuring the government to bring back the detainees and continuing the ceasefire agreement phases, which is creating some kind of balance in addition to the US pressure on the Israeli government, giving the promise to continue the ceasefire agreement. If the ceasefire agreement is violated, this equation will set the map for the next few days. If the ceasefire will continue as planned or not. I think with the Palestinian resistance announcing the 6 names to be released tomorrow on Saturday, I think this will give hope, and that the Palestinian negotiating side from the resistance is committing to the ceasefire items, and it will look in the possibility of mixing up the remains that were delivered to the Israeli side. It is a very positive stance from the Palestinian resistance. And I think that the handover tomorrow will go as planned without any hindrances, especially that there are a lot of pressure from the international community and the Israeli interior to complete the handover as planned, in addition to the pressures practiced by Cairo and Qatar to continue the ceasefire agreement as planned.
Right, with Israel's further escalation, intensifying military operations in the West Bank, as you said, respectively, how might this reflect on the stability of the region, particularly in light of the recent ceasefire agreement and the detainee exchange?
Whether these bombings were the doing of some far-right parties or security bodies that are seeking to fail the ceasefire agreement negotiations, or they are seeking continuing the war and the existence of military troops in the West Bank, which was what happened during the past 24 hours. 3 more brigades were deployed in the West Bank, which means that there is a scheme to continue the annexation of West Bank territories and shifting away from violating the ceasefire agreement in Gaza, and a possibility to go back anytime if the Israeli detainees were not released. And consequently, I do not think that this incident, whether was it the doing of the Palestinian side or the doing of the far-right Israeli parties or security authorities, especially that there were no victims and the bombings were in places of parking lots and parking areas,
right,
and there were no people around.
Yes, plus there has been a blackout from an Israeli court, which is very suspicious. Now that was from Cairo. Al-Ahram newspaper managing editor Mohamed Ezz Elden. We thank you so much for joining us here on Q News.